Today's incident will awaken your soul. Therefore, I request you to watch this story till the very end. When you hear this incident, your hair will stand on end. How a bear attacked a young girl, and how, because of the bear, that girl couldn't show her face to anyone. Then, a few months later, you will be amazed to see what happened to the girl. Everyone who keeps a little girl at home must listen to this story in its entirety. Because the way a bear scratched a little girl, no one could believe it. All night long, cries of save me," echoed from the house, but no one went to help the girl. Let me tell you the entire incident in detail. This morning, an announcement was made at the mosque in Akbarpur that Abbas the butcher had passed away, and his funeral prayer would be held at 5 p.m. Those who were leaving their houses for work and business stopped in their tracks when they heard the announcement. At first, they thought it might have been a mistake or that they had heard the wrong name. How could something happen to Abbas the butcher? Just yesterday evening, Abbas was sitting at his shop selling meat. He was a very righteous and honest man. He prayed 5 times a day. He was a Hafiz and a Quran reciter. Until now, no one had seen him involved in anything wrong. Although he would harm himself, he never caused pain to others. If any poor or orphan child came to his shop, he would give them meat for free. Many people took advantage of his kindness, but he never took revenge on anyone. Friends, please do not skip the video. Watch it all the way to the end. Everyone, please comment beautiful and like this video. And for those who haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to the channel now. The target for likes on this video is 10,000, so please give it a like. Now let's start. It was Monday, but at the same time, everyone was wondering what suddenly happened to Abbas the butcher. Everyone felt sorry for Nazia because her mother had passed away when she was young. After that, Riaz the butcher raised her with the love of both a mother and a father. Everyone reached Nazia, who was crying loudly, holding her father's dead body to her chest. But where would her grief be compensated? People were wondering what had suddenly happened to Abbas. When the truth came out, it was completely unbelievable. Nazia began to explain that after dinner last night, when her father had gone to bed, he kept rubbing his chest, saying that he was in intense pain, that he couldn't breathe, and that it felt like someone had placed a heavy iron piece on his chest. She gave him some medicine, and he fell asleep, but suddenly, in the middle of the night, she heard him screaming. When she turned on the light and went to her father, his bed was soaked with blood. As long as it was dark, she too felt a similar sensation. It felt like a terrifying creature had attacked her father near the bed, but as soon as she turned on the light, there was nothing there, and her father passed away. Hearing this, people were stunned. In fact, those who had bathed Abbas also said the same thing. There were scratches and wounds on Abbas's body. It looked like some animal had brutally scratched him. But this shock remained just a shock because Abbas didn't keep any dogs or cats at home, nor was he particularly interested in animal husbandry. Anyway, at that time, when people were giving Abbas a bath, preparing him for burial, and began reciting the Shaida, suddenly, Abbas's older brother Nazir entered crying, along with his wife and son. He came into the room, banging his head, holding his brother's body, crying and saying, "Where has my brother gone? For God's sake, open your eyes and look at me. Allah is my witness. I've been dreaming for the last 10 days that you've come to me asking for forgiveness. You were crying at my feet, asking me to forgive you, and I was waiting for your call, but now your call has come, not for forgiveness, but for your death." Nazir cried louder, holding his brother's body. Were these cries genuine, or was he pretending to cry? The people around could not understand anything. However, sitting in front of them, Nazia could sense it clearly. Her father's corpse was right in front of her. Because of this, she couldn't do anything. For a while, Nadir continued crying. However, the time for the funeral prayer had come, and people began to prepare for it. But Nazia kept crying, saying, "Please don't take my father away. For the sake of Allah, leave my father here. He's sleeping, and he'll wake up soon." Nazia's midwife and the women of the neighborhood tried to comfort her. Eventually, Abbas was buried in the ground. Many people were left wondering how all this had happened. Abbas the butcher had passed away and moved on to the afterlife. Now everyone was wondering where Nazia, a young girl, would go. But when people saw Nadir and his wife, they felt a little relieved, thinking they would take care of the girl. Slowly, everyone started to leave for their homes. That night, a meeting of the men took place. Nadir was still crying in front of everyone, telling childhood stories, trying to make everyone cry with him. However, one person spoke up and said, "Was it some kind of animal that attacked Abbas the butcher? I think there's another mystery behind this. It seems like someone deliberately released a vicious animal on Abbas. He was such a good man." Upon hearing this, Nadir quickly shifted his gaze and changed the subject, saying, "No, that's not true. My brother was a very righteous man. Maybe he had some illness. I was his brother, so I can tell you he had a blood condition since childhood. When he had anemia, his skin would tear and bleed until the condition was treated. People reluctantly believed this and left the room. After everyone had gone, Nadir embraced his niece, Nazia, tightly and said, "Don't worry, dear. Never feel alone. Your big uncle will take care of you and will always be with you. I won't let you feel lonely." At first, Nazia was suspicious of her uncle, but when he spoke these words with such emotion, she felt that perhaps after 5 years of being apart, her uncle had regained his senses and had become a better person. Nazia reluctantly agreed to go to his house. However, a few days later, her uncle moved all his belongings to Nazia's house so that she could live there for the rest of her life. Nazia had no problem with this, since Abbas the butcher had earned a decent amount of money from his shop. There was no shortage of anything in their house. Every necessary item was present. But one afternoon, when her uncle brought all his things to her house, Nazia screamed. She was sitting in the yard when her uncle came in holding a chain and brought a bear into the house. Nazia was a very thin girl, and if the bear stood on just 1 foot, it would be over 6 feet tall. The bear looked terrifying, and its eyes were completely red. When the bear entered the house, Nazia screamed. Upon hearing her scream, the bear started growling and tore the chain, running toward Nazia. She screamed and quickly hid behind her uncle, saying, "What is this? Why did you bring such a terrifying thing into the house? I'm scared of it. When my father died, I heard similar terrifying growls coming from his room. It felt like this bear was there." As she cried, her uncle's wife embraced her and said, "Don't cry, dear. We're here, and we'll always be here with you. When we used to live in the city, your uncle used to earn money by showing this bear's tricks. Since we're living here with you now, we can't just let go of the bear." In the yard, the bear was chained, growling and trying to get to Nazia. Nazia was terrified and kept watching the bear. Seeing her scared, her uncle said, "If you're so scared of this bear, I'll sell it right away. It's a pet, it doesn't harm people. But I don't understand why it's so angry seeing you." He comforted her, saying he would sell the bear soon. Gradually, people became more focused on their lives, and the neighbors stopped visiting Nazia as frequently. Abbas the butcher's meat shop was now being managed by Nadir and his children. Nadir's child was 5 years older than Nazia. Within a few years, Nadir and his children began to take control of Abbas's house and shop. Since the death of her father, Nazia had become completely silent. She didn't have time to think that her uncle had come again to take over everything. One day, Nazia was sweeping the yard when she noticed the bear staring at her and growling. She thought that maybe the bear was hungry. Thinking this, Nazia went into the kitchen, got a piece of bread, and placed it in front of the bear. She nervously approached the bear. When she went to give the bread to the bear, somehow the bear's chain came off. The bear quickly lunged at Nazia, and she screamed, calling her uncle. She lost her senses when she saw the bear free from its chain and rushing toward her. Out of fear, Nazia's vision went dark. She started to retreat, calling for her uncle. At that moment, the bear leaped on her. Nazia screamed. But surprisingly, hearing her scream, the people of the village rushed in with whatever they could find, throwing things at the bear to save Nazia. However, inside the house, her aunt didn't think it was necessary to come outside. She sat inside, waiting for the bear to attack Nazia and kill her. But when the villagers arrived, she quickly covered her head with a scarf and came outside. In a dramatic fashion, her aunt hugged Nausea, who was injured, and said, "You fool, who told you to go near the bear? You knew it would growl at you when it saw you, so why did you approach it? Look at what the bear has done to you." After this, the villagers started to fear the bear. In the afternoon, when Nadir returned home, he said, "This bear attacks people, so I won't sell it. I'll either leave it in the jungle or sell it." The villagers began to worry, thinking, if the bear roams the village, what will happen to us and our children? Nausea had suffered a lot. Gradually, her aunt's behavior toward her started to change. Initially, her aunt did all the housework and treated Nausea kindly, but later she started pretending to be ill, making Nausea do all the work while she rested. She even stopped Nausea's education. Her aunt said, "I've prayed for your father, and that's why the whole village has been fed, spending a lot of money. There's no money now, but when the money comes, you can start your education." Nausea was living like a servant in her own house. One day, when Nausea was cooking in the kitchen, she thought about telling her uncle and aunt to go back to their house, as she could live alone in the village, and the women here were very kind. Although this house belonged to Nausea, she was living there as a servant. While thinking this, she suddenly felt someone's hand on her shoulder from behind. When she turned around in fear, she saw Ahmad standing there. Seeing her uncle's son so close to her, she became very scared and said, "What happened? Do you need something?" Ahmad quickly looked around, closed the kitchen door, and approached Nausea. He placed both his hands on her shoulders and said, "Nausea, you don't know how much I love you. I want to marry you. Will you be my wife? Believe me, I will keep you very happy. I can see how my parents have changed in their treatment of you. They're making you work like a servant in your own house. But don't worry, after some time, I will marry you and make you my wife, and I won't let my mother boss you around." Upon hearing this, Nausea quickly moved back and said, "What are you saying? I've always seen you as a brother." That night, when everyone sat down for dinner, Nausea started to speak to her uncle, saying, "Uncle, why don't you take the bear and go back to the city? You could live there, and I could stay here alone in this house. The neighbors here are just like my family. They will take good care of me. My father earned so much respect in his lifetime that the people of this village will not let anything harm me. But I don't think you should stay here." After this, Nausea gathered courage and continued, "This morning, Ahmad said these things to me in the kitchen." Nausea's uncle became very angry and started hitting Ahmad, and Lariba got scared seeing all this. Nausea said, "Don't hit Ahmad." Then her aunt joined her hands and said, "What kind of girl are you? You're creating a fight between father and child. I thought you were a good girl, that I would make you my daughter-in-law and take you to the city, but you're having my son beaten by his father." Nadir also wanted to marry Nausea to his son and take over the house and shop. A few years ago, he had approached his younger brother the same way, seeing his success. But Abbas had severed all relations with him after learning about his brother's intentions. Nadir placed his hand on Nausea's head and said, "Don't worry, as long as your father is alive, no one can harm you. You won't marry until you turn 18. And if you don't like my son, I will arrange your marriage with someone you like." He was trying in every way to trap his niece, and he had succeeded. But Ahmad was furious and wanted revenge. Days passed in this way, and that night there was heavy rainfall. Nausea had a slight fever because, despite being sick, she had done all the housework. Her body weakened due to the fever, and she couldn't eat properly. She went to her room and fell asleep. Nausea never thought that this night would turn out to be so terrifying for her. It was the dead of night, and Ahmad was seething with rage. He went to the corner of the room where the bear was sleeping. He left his scarf near the bear, which was Nausea's scarf, and the bear started sniffing it, smelling Nausea's scent. He released the bear, and its eyes turned menacing. Nausea was peacefully sleeping in her room. When the door creaked open quietly, she heard deep breaths and growling, which made her realize that someone was coming toward her. At that moment, the lights went out, and her room became completely dark. Nausea then sensed a foul odor and couldn't breathe properly. When she opened her eyes, a hand full of fur reached toward her. Nausea could feel someone approaching. In the middle of the night, she screamed and tried to save herself. but it was all in vain. Nazia's cries faded as her body was covered with scratches and bruises. "I'll make you suffer like that night." When Nazia heard this, she couldn't believe her ears. Her aunt then said, "From today, you won't be allowed to leave the house. When you're hungry, you'll place your fingerprints on the papers." They locked Nazia in a room, and when Liba screamed, her voice reached the room where the bear was kept. The bear, showing a glimpse of humanity, broke the door and entered Nazia's room, and everyone from the house rushed there. Seeing this, Nazia became even more terrified and screamed louder, believing the bear would attack her again. At that moment, the neighbors heard the screams and came to the house, knocking on the door. When they couldn't get in, they climbed over the wall and entered through the roof. The scene they found was shocking. Nazia was unconscious, and the bear had torn Ahmad apart. Her uncle and aunt were lying in a corner, injured. Nazia was lying semi-unconscious. The people beat the bear and scared away. They even considered killing the bear. However, at that moment, Nazia intervened and told them to stay away from a bear, saying, "Maybe it's a wild animal, but don't kill it. It saved my life. My aunt would have killed me, but she not only punished me for my sins, but also killed those who harmed me." It proved that the real wrongdoers were not the bear, but my own family. The bear was handed over to an organization that could take care of it. Ahmad had died. When her uncle and aunt regained consciousness, they cried and confessed their sins in front of everyone. They admitted that they had killed her father, Abbas. With their son now on his deathbed, they went mad and started begging on the streets. The neighbors took responsibility for Nazia. Time passed, and when Nazia grew up, she married into a good family. The people of the village bid her farewell, treating her like their own daughter. Now, she lives happily with her husband, but she will never forget what happened to her and her father. Those who wronged her and her father have received their punishment. So, friends, this was our video for today. If you liked the video, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And if you have any opinions about the video, please let us know in the comments. We'll see you in the next video. Allah Hafiz.